The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
You are back in the House of Mystery. Am I alone again? Are you sleeping again?
I was taking a nap. I'm sorry, Al.
Well, I saw all that. I see all that kung fu stuff you were doing on Facebook. Like, what? I mean, trying to be manly or something? Like, what's going on?
I'm trying, man.
Oh, holy cow! I mean, you see all the comments. You know, all these people were impressed.
I know they're impressed by just.
Well, you could even do a whole twirl around there and not fall down. This is like I thought it was Steven Seagal for a moment.
Yes.
I thought he was like he making a comeback, you know. But then, then I realized it was Queen Latifah. They just close in on the fists, and the foot. That's it.
That's it. That's all they do for me. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, well, that's all it takes nowadays. We have the technology. Like the $6 million man.
Absolutely.
Well, that was great. I was pretty impressed. I had to take a nap after that.
I'm sure you did.
Holy cow! I realized how old I was. Holy cow! Anyway, well, in the house, who have we got in the house today? We've got someone pretty exciting. Let's see. We've got an author and a lawyer. So we've got to behave ourselves. Get sued here. So Robyn Gigl, thank you for being here.
Oh, Al, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We'll see if you say that at the end of the show.
I'm sure I will.
So Robyn, now, wow, so your new book, By Way of Sorrow. Now, this is an Erin McCabe legal thriller. There's a lot of parts to this book to talk about. First of all, that's a unique name. I really like the name of the book, the title, By Way of Sorrow. So is that significant for you?
Yes, and I will openly confess that I stole it from one of my favorite songs, a song by Way of Sorrow, which was written by Julie Miller. The version that I really like was done by 3 singer-songwriters who perform under the name Cry, Cry, Cry. But the song truly spoke to me. It's about getting to a place of acceptance and joy, but you go through sorrow to get there. So that's what spoke to me.
Well, it's interesting. So obviously there's a lot more to the book than just the legal thriller or the story involved. This has a lot deeper of a meaning then.
Yes, it's a legal thriller, and that's the purpose. I want everybody to read it and enjoy the thrill part of it. But it's a story with 2 transgender women who are the main protagonists in the story, Erin McCabe, who is the lawyer, and her client, Sharise Barnes. And so it's my hope that in addition to writing a really interesting and exciting legal thriller, that as people read it, they will get a greater understanding of what it's like and what it means to be transgender.
Well, that's interesting. Now, now getting this book published, is it an uphill climb when you have your main characters, let's say, or the main people in your story, being transgender? Is that sort of a harder thing to sell to a publisher?
Al, the honest answer is I'm not really sure. By Way of Sorrow is my debut novel in terms of being published. I had written an earlier novel that I finished probably in 2014. We got an agent. We started trying to sell it. It also had a transgender main character, and that book didn't sell. But I don't want to blame it on the fact that it had, a transgender character as the main protagonist. I just don't think it was as compelling a story as it could have been. I look back on it now, and I actually say thank God it didn't sell, because it's not as good a book as By Way of Sorrow is, or at least, as I view it. And I guess in that sense, I wrote By Way of Sorrow, got it to my agent, and within 3 months it was acquired by Kensington. So it wasn't like I had a tough slog trying to sell By Way of Sorrow. So that's why maybe I'm not the best judge of what it's like for other authors in terms of trying to get a book published with a transgender character.
No, but it's important because you've done it. So, and that's good to hear your story. It's an Erin McCabe legal thriller. So, who is Erin McCabe, and how would you describe Erin to the listeners?
Erin McCabe is a 35-year-old transgender woman who is a criminal defense attorney, and she is partners in a law firm with a gentleman by the name of Duane Swisher, who is a African-American former FBI agent. And Erin had transitioned 3 years prior to this story starting. So it's not a book about Erin transitioning. It's not a story about, what someone goes through when they go through the gender confirmation process. But it's a story of two women who are on the other side of having transitioned, and what their lives are like, both the good, the bad, and the ugly, in terms of the way they're treated and the issues that they have to deal with. But Erin is a very self-assured, aggressive lawyer who has, I like to think, a good sense of humor, and is a good lawyer.
And that's interesting because you've had a legal career yourself. So, a lot of authors we talk to, especially in the fiction categories, put a lot of themselves into a character. Is there a lot of you in Erin?
The answer is, this is going to sound like a very lawyerly answer. The answer is yes or no. As I said earlier, I had written a prior novel with a transgender protagonist. And I think part of the problem with that book was that it was so much me that it almost didn't feel authentic. The person, even though, I had poured my heart and soul into it, didn't come across as a real character. So when I started writing By Way of Sorrow, I fell back on the old trope, write what you know. So I am an attorney. I've done a lot of criminal defense work. I am a transgender woman. So I created a character who is a, transgender woman who's a criminal defense attorney. But I also wanted her to be decidedly not me. So she's 35 years old. I'm not. I'm much older than that. I'm almost double that. And she's a very attractive woman who winds up in a relationship with a man. And that's not me. But I felt like I could tell Erin's story in terms of what I did know about being a criminal defense lawyer, about being a trans woman. So there's parts of me that are in Erin. And, I think some people who know me well, sometimes when they read the book, they say, oh, I could hear your voice when I was reading, Erin say something. But then there's other parts of Erin that are decidedly not me.
I'm going to ask you something, but before I get into that, what made you decide to write a book like this and a legal thriller, and what was the initiative, or what was the catalyst to make you actually write and put it out there to be published?
So I've always wanted to write. I think I started my first novel probably 40 years ago, right after I got out of law school. It was, I had not transitioned at that point. I was, writing a novel that I envisioned as the catch-22 of the legal profession at the time. But, a legal career, 3 children, writer's block, all of those things got in the way of that novel ever being completed. And so it's set in a briefcase somewhere, gathering dust, and every once in a while I take it out and look at it and, eventually when computers came along, I put it on a word processor, but never finished it. Fast forward to 2011 or so. I have a son, Colin Gigl, who is also a published author, and he got me into doing NaNoWriMo. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but write a novel in the month of November. And we both agreed to try to do it. And so that got me writing again. It kind of got the juices flowing, so to speak. And I didn't complete NaNoWriMo, but he did, and ultimately he took that and did work it into a novel that was published in 2016 called The Ferryman Institute. And I took what I was working on, and that eventually became the novel that didn't sell. But again, just, I was living on my own at the time. My kids were all grown, and I love to write. It's something that I do for enjoyment. I know a lot of authors, kind of cringe when I say that, but for me it's fun. And so I don't watch a lot of television. I read and I write. And so once I got back into it, I found that I really enjoyed it. And so when the first book didn't sell, I decided, there were elements of a thriller in the first book that was never published. And I decided, let's turn this one into a legal thriller. And kind of surprisingly, the catalyst for it was To Kill a Mockingbird. And again, I don't want to compare my book in any way to Kill a Mockingbird, but I had reread that, and I was kind of struck by the fact that so much of To Kill a Mockingbird I had forgotten was a courtroom drama. And the courtroom drama revolves around Tom Robinson, a young African-American man in the 30s, accused of molesting a white woman. And I was just fascinated by what was Tom thinking. I mean, what was going through Tom's head as this trial was going on? But of course, that story is told all through the point of view of scouts, so we never get in Tom's head. And so I wanted to write a thriller where we could get into the heads of not only the lawyer, but the woman accused of the crime.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So you put a lot of yourself into the book, and so you kind of it's sort of a little bit of, I don't know, you have to be pretty brave when you put some of your own personal feelings and thoughts into a character or characters and in a story. How do you feel about putting yourself out there like that in such a social media world?
I didn't think too much about it. I mean, one of the things that I do in addition to writing and in addition to being a full-time lawyer is I do a lot of speaking and teaching on LGBTQ plus issues, and in particular, transgender issues and the legal ramifications. So I do a lot of public speaking, and whenever I do that, I'm putting myself out there, because one of the things that I like to do is use myself as a human face, because so many people don't know someone who's transgender. I give them the opportunity to learn about some of the issues through me. So I guess in a way I'm kind of used to putting myself out there. And yes, this is different because you're right. If I speak to, the New Jersey State Police, nobody's going to go online and start, throwing all kinds of comments around about me and things like that. But I guess I'm knocking on wood as I say this. I've been really lucky that the reactions to By Way of Sorrow have been very positive, and I haven't been attacked in any way. I hope that doesn't change as a result of this show. But
give it time.
But in that sense, Al, I'm kind of used to putting myself out there.
Now, is it hard to work as an attorney while writing a legal thriller? And I ask that because we've had some writers in the intelligence community who couldn't, it's a little bit different, but they couldn't write spy fiction while they were working for an intelligence agency. And, I was also wondering, does it feel like you're always at work?
So, one of the things that I sometimes put in my bio is, I practice law by day and I write by night. Unfortunately, I have a very boring social life, which is true. But as I said, for me, writing isn't work. It's something, I'll come home from when we used to go to the office and now we're starting to get back to going to the office, or go to the courthouse. I'd come home, I'd, go for a walk or a run or whatever, kind of cleanse the palate, come back, shower, have dinner, and then sit down and write. And, unlike somebody who's, for example, if I worked for a prosecutor's office or if I worked for the courts, there might be some restrictions on me because of the job where, you can't reveal certain things. Fortunately, I'm an attorney in private practice, and the only ones I have to keep happy are my partners and my clients. And so, there were no restrictions. Obviously, I made sure that the story I told didn't bear resemblance to any of the clients I've ever represented. The characters don't bear any resemblance to any people that I know or I've ever dealt with. So made sure that it was really fictional. But other than that, Dave, there really were no other restrictions on me other than to tell a good story and make it compelling for the audience.
Okay, you can tell us the truth. Now, what client did you talk about and what did they do? Come on. Come on. We won't tell anybody, really.
No. It'll just be our secret, right?
It'll be our secret. I won't say a word, really.
There you go.
Oh, no, it's pretty, but how is it, if I can ask, because in the story, you've got a lawyer who's transgender, as well as that's part of who you are in your real life. How is it in real life, and does it come across that way in this book? Was that an important thing for you to display for readers, is to what it's really like in that position?
So I will always tell everyone that I have had a very privileged life in many ways. And when I transitioned, I was already into my 50s with an established legal career, a family that, accepted me for who I was. And so I didn't face a lot of the challenges that many transgender people do. But that said, I did lose a lot of friends. I did lose some clients. So those were things that I experienced. And even if they're not things that, are reflected directly in the book, they're things that you can translate and put into a character in terms of the way that feels and how it impacts you. And the second part is, Sharise is a young transgender woman of color. And even though that's not my journey, and I was always very careful to make sure that Sharise was authentic as possible, Sharise faced problems that Erin didn't. Erin, in many ways, is more like me in that she's white. She had a legal career. She didn't lose her legal career. And though she experienced problems with her family, her mother was accepting, her law partner was accepting. There were people in her life that didn't leave her, that didn't desert her. Whereas Sharise faced a much more challenging situation where she was thrown out of her home or forced to leave her home when she was 15 and live on the streets. And that's true for so many transgender people who are rejected. So I wanted to have, both worlds reflected there. It was in some respects easier for Erin, but she still had a lot of things that she had to deal with in terms of her family, people still not being comfortable with who she was. And then I wanted to reflect what it was like for somebody like Sharise, who truly lost the support system that is important to all of us as human beings. She lost her family. She was living on the streets, and what that is like for transgender people. So I wanted to try to get that mix and show the full range of the experience that some trans people have.
How is it? How is it in the legal community itself? Do you find that other lawyers or judges or people in the community itself do they treat you differently, or do you feel like you're shied away about somewhat, or how is your response to the legal community?
So I transitioned 12 years ago, and I will tell you that I was incredibly pleasantly surprised by how well I was accepted. At the time I transitioned, I was the managing partner, meaning the boss, of a 19-lawyer law firm. So I had to come out to, not only my partners in that law firm, but the other lawyers and staff. And then I had to come out to clients, and I had to come out to judges and adversaries. And I will say, I don't want to, make it sound like there were no bumps in the road. There were. But for the most part, the legal community, the judges, the lawyers who were my adversaries were incredibly kind and accepting. And I always remember there was a case that I was involved in at the time. And, it was a hard-fought case. We were going back and forth, and I took time off. I was out of the office for about a month while I went through the gender confirmation process. And one of the lawyers in the case took the time to write me a handwritten note, wishing me well and hoping that everything, turned out okay and all those nice things. And then ended by saying, but when you come back, nothing's going to change. We're still going to go at it. And that's all I wanted. And it made me feel, just incredibly proud of some of the people in the legal community. And so, again, I think in many respects I was spared some of the things that other trans people have to go through. And I don't necessarily know why. Maybe I was fortunate. Maybe I had the respect of people. I don't know. But, it wasn't without bumps. As I said, I did lose clients. There were lawyers who had referred cases to me that stopped referring cases to me. But for the most part, on the whole, I would say it was a tremendously positive experience.
Well, that's good. It said something about the people you chose to work with, right? Rather than, it wasn't Rudy Giuliani or anybody like that. So, because that could have been a little rougher, right? That would have been,
Yeah, no, I'm not sure that I would have survived for almost. I was at that firm for almost 30 years, so I don't think I would have survived 6 months in a firm that even though they didn't know I was transgender, just in terms of their values and the way they interacted with the world, I was with good people.
So this is the first book, you say, of this series. So did you plot out several books in your mind ahead of time? Did you sort of outline what you wanted to do with Erin and where you wanted this character to go and how many books? Or is this just kind of do it as you go type thing?
It's again a combination of both. So I know, boy, you're going to get off. Oh, she's such a lawyer. She everything's a little bit of both. So by way of sorrow was really by the seat of the pants, I had the idea of the story. I had the two main characters. But when I go back and look at early drafts of the story, it's interesting how it changed over time. So, in the vernacular, it was definitely a pantser. The characters kind of took over and it went where it went. But when Kensington bought By Way of Sorrow, they signed me to a 2-book deal. And so I didn't have 2 books. So the way it works, in the industry is, okay, book 1 is done and we have it in the queue. It's going to get published. Now write a synopsis of book 2. So for book 2, Survivor's Guilt, which comes out in January of 2022, I had to do exactly what you said. I had to plot it out. I had to come up with the story ahead of time and, send it off to my editor and say, John, here it is. What do you think? and fortunately he liked it and approved it. Survivor's Guilt is done and in the process. I signed to a 2-book deal. Depending on how book 1, 2 do, maybe there'll be a book 3, maybe there won't be. So I have started book 3, and again, like book 2, I assume at some point I'm going to have to do a synopsis if I want somebody to buy it. So it will be plotted out, but I don't have books 4 and 5 already thought through and saying, okay, as soon as somebody buys 3 and I get it written, I'm going to do 4. It's pretty much take it one step at a time.
I've had a character in an old novel, or an older novel, just kind of insert himself into a newer book, and which surprised me. I'm just wondering if, through the writing that you've done, have you ever had a character that's done anything to surprise you?
I'm not sure if I follow the question correctly, Dave. So if I get it wrong, I apologize and come back and tell me I got it wrong. But it's interesting. Book 3, when I wrote Survivor's Guilt, which is book 2, it's not a continuation of By Way of Sorrow. Okay. So Erin is there, Duane is there, the boyfriend is there, Erin's boyfriend is there, Erin's mom is there, family and stuff like that. They're all there, but none of the other characters are there. It's a totally different story. What's kind of interesting is so many people kind of commented on the fact that, the way By Way of Sorrow ends, they felt a little unsatisfied. So what I'm doing with book 3, or at least right now toying with, is doing more of a sequel to By Way of Sorrow and having some of the same characters come back into the story. Of course, it's a challenging process because you can't give spoilers for By Way of Sorrow because, somebody might come to, if there ever is a book 3, somebody might come to it, read it and say, oh, this is really interesting. Some of these characters are in book 1. Let me go back and read it. So you don't want to basically give away what happens in By Way of Sorrow, but yet have some of the same characters in a continuation. So I'm not sure if that's what you were asking, Dave, and if I got it wrong, I apologize.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Just make book 3 a dream. It was all a dream, right? When in doubt, it's a dream. Then you can start over. You can have them do whatever you decide to change my mind. That's what I do. It's like,
I'm going to show my age with the old Bob Newhart show, right?
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And only a few of us remember that. So, well, where do your characters come from then? Where do you get your characters? I mean, of course, your main character, we've talked about some of the main ones, but all of the accessory characters or the people that kind of add to the story, do you create their personalities just out of your mind, or do you just sort of see people in a restaurant, or do you see someone in a shopping mall and kind of take that personality, or where does it come from for you?
In terms of characters like Duane Swisher, who is Erin's partner, law partner, and Mark Simpson, who is her boyfriend, they're people that I kind of know that fit those general descriptions. And of course, knowing who Erin is, I know the type of person that she'd want to be in a partnership with, in both the legal sense and in the emotional sense. So you craft the characters that would, if she's going to date somebody, she's going to date somebody who kind of can deal with the issue that, their girlfriend is a transgender woman. And the same thing in terms of a law partner. And you get to play with those little things in the story, but the characters, they're going to fit a certain type because of who Erin is. As you had mentioned earlier, Al, it's not going to be, Rudy Giuliani that, she's in a law partnership with. So there's that. I will say that the one character that is truly drawn on somebody I love is Peg McCabe, Erin's mom. And Peg is based loosely on my own mom, who, when I came out, she struggled with, her child being transgender. It's not what she wanted. She was a very religious woman, and fought me kind of tooth and nail in the beginning. But before I went through my transition, we had dinner together, and she said, I don't understand this. I don't want this. I wish you wouldn't do this, but you're my child, and I will always love you. And she did. And so Peg McCabe is an homage to my mom. Unfortunately, my mom passed away before By Way of Sorrow was published, but, she did know it was coming. She was feisty right till the end. And so, Peg McCabe is the closest to a person in my own life. And then the other characters, the senator and the other people that are around there, I live in New Jersey. Political corruption is kind of well known in New Jersey. So you take bits and pieces of things and you craft them onto one character, but you try to make the character three-dimensional because you don't want to have comic book villains. You want to have real people with real motivations, and you want the reader to understand what those motivations are, even if they don't agree with them. So again, and in terms of prosecutors and things like that, an amalgamation of people that I've come in contact with over a 43-year legal career.
Oh, it's interesting. So after finishing this book and getting it published, how do you think it's changed you?
Other than I know in my obituary there will be a line that she was a published author, I'm not really sure that it has. I mean, it's not like, I don't want to denigrate the House of Mystery in any way, but it's not like all of a sudden, I'm in demand and, my life has changed and people are stopping me on the street and asking for my autograph. Sales have been okay, but, I'm not on any bestseller list and don't expect to be at this point. So, I still practice law full time. I still write at night, and I don't know that my life has changed that much.
Well, I sort of was looking more toward after you've actually gone through the emotions and the part of writing and getting it out there, and you look back at it now. Do you think you come out of it the other side kind of differently than you were when you started writing?
In the sense that if you had told me 3 years ago, Robyn, you're going to write a book that is going to get published and is going to be reviewed in the New York Times, I would have thought you were crazy. So in that sense, it's been an absolute joy. And I don't want to diminish that joy in any way or make it sound like I am not just absolutely thrilled with how things have gone. I guess it's also been, in my case, tempered somewhat because By Way of Sorrow was originally supposed to come out in June of 2020. And then we had this little thing called the pandemic that delayed publication until March of 2021. So, there was all that excitement. There was all the ramping up that comes with having a debut novel and trying to line up appearances at book fairs and bookstores and everything else. And then everything just closed down. And, for 9 months, I sat out there with, working on book 2 with book 1 in limbo. So I think that, maybe I shaped my experience a little bit in that, the joy, the excitement and everything. Again, I don't want to diminish it in any way because when it came out in March of this year, it was thrilling. It was unbelievable, but it maybe was a little bit tempered by the fact that I couldn't do, I couldn't do a lot of the things that first-time authors get to experience in terms of going to bookstores and doing book signings and all those kinds of things. So, again, I don't know if that answered it, Al. If it didn't, I apologize.
Well, I'm wondering, too, there are a lot of listeners, I'm sure, who would like to write a novel. They have busy, full lives. And I just wonder, if you have any advice for the, beginning writers out there.
I would say that it's a process. I told you I started writing in the first novel 40 years ago, but I don't count that one because nothing ever happened with that. But then I did complete a manuscript and I did get an agent. So already I've been a lot more fortunate than many people. But then you start trying to sell it and you see rejection after rejection after rejection and the comments coming back and you're wondering like, oh man, do I have any clue what I'm doing? Nobody likes this book or they, one rejection will say the characters aren't, authentic enough. The other one will say, oh, the characters are authentic, but I didn't like the story. And so, you get tossed back and forth in terms of all those things. And then again, I wrote, By Way of Sorrow and, book one never sold. And I wrote By Way of Sorrow and, it got its fair share of rejections before Kensington purchased it. And so my advice to people would be, number one, in terms of that book that I started 40 years ago, never give up on your dream. It's always possible because here I am 40 years later with a published novel. And the second part is don't view all those no's that you get from, I don't know how many no's I got when I was querying the first book from agents and then no's from publishers. Don't take those as failures. It's all part of the process and it's a learning experience. I think By Way of Sorrow is a better book because I experienced the rejections that went with the first novel. And rather than saying, I can't write, I said, I have to do a better job. I have to create a better book. And so, again, the advice I would give to any unpublished writer is don't give up. Don't take those rejections as failures. Take them as learning experiences and keep at it. If it could happen for me, it can happen for you.
That's right. But, the people that reject you, you hunt them down. And do not take that from anybody.
That's my next That's my next novel, Al.
That's right. Yeah, I write true crime, so I'll tell you, they reject me, I'm going after them and writing a book about them. They'll know better next time. So let's talk about the day in the life of Robyn. So, what's it like for you in your writing process? Like, so you sort of say you kind of, work in the day and write at night and stuff. Do you like pre-plan certain times? Like, say, I'm going to write 2 hours today, or do you put kind of things on yourself, like I need to have 1,000 words written or 3,000 or whatever, or do you set time aside? Do you have any special techniques to doing your writing?
I don't have any special techniques, and I don't pigeonhole myself into saying I have to sit down and write from 8 o'clock tonight till 11 o'clock, and I need to get 500 words on the page, and if I don't, my day's been a disaster. Because I have a full-time legal career, my schedule is often in flux. All of a sudden I have a deposition that I have to prepare for, and even if I thought, it'll be nice to come home and write tonight, no, I have to review documents, and I have to be ready for tomorrow to take somebody's deposition. So I have to have a lot of flexibility, not only in terms of my schedule, but in terms of my own psyche, in terms of how I plan to write. So, there might be times when I'll look at my schedule and I'll say, Wednesday, Thursday of this week, I kind of have a break. So when I come home, I'll have some writing time. But again, I don't put the pressure on myself to make sure that I get a certain number of words on the page. I try to stick with it, but I will be the first to admit that I'm easily distracted, and, I can go off on different tangents. And then there's other times, like this weekend, I started in earnest on book 3, and I wrote 5,000 words. I don't know if any of them are in English, but I wrote 5,000 words. And so when I get in a zone, I try to stay there, and I try to stay in that zone and keep my day and focus as much as possible. It was, at one point, my son called me Sunday morning and said, "Hey, can you come over?" And I said, "Is it okay if I come over later in the day? Because I'm in the zone right now." And he's a writer, so he understood, and he said, "Yeah, no, later is fine." So, you try to make sure that or at least I try to make sure that when it's coming to me, that I milk it for everything that I can, because I don't know when I'm going to get back to it again. I have, a deposition tomorrow. And so I'm not going to get off our talk tonight and start writing. I'm going to start looking at what I have to do tomorrow. Now, tomorrow night, I'm looking at it and saying, well, tomorrow might be a good writing night. So, with the day job that I have, writing still takes a back seat. Even, sometimes I wish it didn't, but it has to. But that said, it's an important backseat, and when I get there and things are working right, I try to take full advantage of it.
Oh yeah, you might as well, go with it, So now, how do you want people to find you? Do you give out your street address, phone number, or do you have a website, or something like that? What's the best place for people to find out more about you and your writing?
They can go to robingigl.com, which is my website, which has information on my books and podcasts that I've done, and reviews and articles and things of that nature. They can follow me on Twitter at Robyn Gigl. I'm probably the only living human being that's not on Facebook, but I'm not. So they can't find me there. The two places are basically the website and Twitter. I have an Instagram account, but I will confess I'm old. It's just not me.
Yeah, I feel that way all the time. That's Well, we'll have everything linked up to our site as well, so people listening can find you and hopefully say something nice. I wonder, so, with this pandemic and everything the last couple of years, when there's a lot of tension in your life, and you being a lawyer too, so when things are stressful, do you find that gets into your writing? Do you think that somehow when things around you are kind of, feel like they're out of control or a little bit turmoil, do you think that seeps in to the tone of your writing?
I guess I was fairly fortunate during the pandemic and continuing on, because unfortunately the pandemic is continuing on, in that I do live alone. And, when we shut the office down in March of 2020, the courts went remote, people doing depositions went remote, everything really transitioned fairly well. So, in that sense, it wasn't as stressful for me as for, some other people in my office who have young kids who, I have a son and a daughter who are teachers, and I have a daughter-in-law who's a principal. The stress in their lives in terms of how and what they were expected to do was so much different from mine. So again, I think I was fortunate in that we were able to transition very quickly to, working remotely and going to the court remotely and doing depositions remotely. So in that sense, there wasn't the stress that so many other people had in other professions. And I think primarily of people in healthcare, teachers, essential workers, they had a lot of stress in their lives. I was fortunate. I could hole up in my condo, be safe, and still work. And so, and I guess also just being a writer, the solitude, I'm okay with it. It's not something that was terribly stressful for me. As, some of us joke, we didn't have to make up excuses not to see people. Here it was, hey, sorry, we can't see each other. There's a pandemic. So it afforded me actually more time to write because there were no other commitments really other than the day job that I had to worry about. And it was awful not seeing my family, not seeing my grandkids, and not being, with my mom, as much as I would have liked to have been. But those were not really as stressful as it was for other people. So again, I think I was very fortunate, and I always try to count my blessings.
Yeah, you have to. So who are your influences?
Oh boy, that's always a tough question. So I guess, probably one of the big ones would be Scott Turow. When he burst through however many years ago with Presumed Innocent, that, the way he wrote, the way he took parts of his own life and mixed that into the story, was for me fascinating. But there's so many people, I don't want to sound like I'm shamelessly plugging my own son, but, he has been a tremendous influence on me in terms of, we write very differently, but, watching him go through the process ahead of me, has been enlightening in that sense. In terms of other authors, some of the classic, mystery writers, Agatha Christie, Sue Grafton, just people who I grew up reading and really enjoying, have certainly, I think, seeped into my subconscious, if not my conscious, in terms of the way I write.
You forgot to mention the host.
I was saving you for last. Now you jumped in.
You're supposed to say, and of course, your books are an incredible influence on me. I couldn't get through the day.
Absolutely.
I don't believe it now. I'm not buying it now.
I'm a lawyer. You can't believe anything I say.
Well, this is true, right? That's what they say, Maybe you should have your own court show, too, next. Get on there and start doing TV, court TV, You ever thought about writing true crime or something like that?
No, I really haven't. A lot of people have asked me about, did I ever think about writing a memoir? And the answer is no. I would never write a memoir. Number one, I don't think my life is that interesting. And number two, a memoir is always one person's point of view, and I never think it's fair to everybody else in someone's life. But true crime, no. I enjoy reading true crime, Al, especially your books. But no, I don't, I have never thought about doing anything nonfiction.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting kind of thing, wow, it's been really good. So what's next? Book 3, I guess, and keep on going with your legal career, and we'll see what's next. So, wow, it's been very interesting. I really appreciate you being on. And the book, of course, we're talking about is By Way of Sorrow, and it's an Erin McCabe legal thriller. And our guest has been the author, Robyn Gigl. Thank you for being here.
Al, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Robyn.
To find out more about our show, guests, or to listen to past shows from our archive, please go to www.houseofmysteryradio.com.
The mission has been completed.
The end. By George, he's got it. It is the end.
I'll see you.
If you're lying to me, I'll be back.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.